like I said, right, I mean, at the outset of the conversation, I think these are extremely interesting times, right? With what is happening, right, what COVID has done, I think it's been absolutely unreal. Well, of course, it's touched us at many, many levels, right? Personally, I think each one of us has had a difficult time, right? But I think from a business standpoint, it's just made us and brought us to think at a point where it's become important for us to think of technology as a priority, right? It's become very, very critical that we start looking at some of these solutions for basic delivery of our services, right? And I think that's something which is going to become all the more important, right? Given that the consumer is now kind of the consumer landscape has become so much more dynamic, right? It's going to become very important that we blend technology, right? Because the expectation in a B2B environment and a B2C environment is going to be just so much more uh, out of these businesses, right? It's going to be extremely important for them to be very, very agile. It's going to be extremely important for them to be aware of what's happening around them. And that's only possible with having right kind of technology blended into your operations, right? I think gone are the days, right, where we could survive in an offline setting without, in the comfort of our offices, right, in the comfort of the environments and relationships that we had, and not, and wanting to sort of defer utilization of technology. I think gone are those times, right? I think COVID, the way it broke down, right? I think it's a new paradigm that we're essentially entering, right? I think a lot of this we essentially, as an economy, we are getting into uncharted territories. We don't necessarily know in terms of how the consumer is going to behave, which essentially means that that supply chain will have to essentially be aligned to that, right? And I think these are trends and these are paths that are going to become clear in the next few quarters, possibly a year down the line, right? We're still not out of the woods. The anticipation of the economy is that in about 6 months to 8 months we're going to be out of in a better environment, right? And I think the pressure is going to be very, very different from them, right? And thus it becomes very important to talk technology today, right? And that is important for, like I said, every SME, MSME, largely because that's the backbone of, I think, any economy, be it a developing economy or be it a developed economy, right? And this is something which is being discussed across borders, right? Thus, keeping in mind with all of what we are sort of experiencing, I think it becomes very important that we are here together and we're going to be discussing the priorities, right? And some of the things, aspects that need to be looked at, uh, products and processes that need to be implemented, blended with right kind of technology. Hand holding becomes very important. Risk in an environment, in this kind of environment, also becomes very important, right? And I think also the fact that digital is something which is relatively new, right? We're going to be prone to very different kind of continuity risks, right? We'll have to equip our teams to sort of understand technology better, right? So I think there are a lot of those nuances, right? There are a lot of those complexities which become important in a context of an SME, MSME, and I think we're going to be talking about a lot of that today, right? With an extremely solid, rocking panel of people, right? With that, I'm going to bring in Gaurav, a very dear friend, DGM, SME Regional Marketing from Tata Tele Business Services, to do a quick presentation on building businesses with resilience, right? And building for very extremely competitive times that we're headed into, right? Gaurav, over to you for this presentation where you talk of how do you calibrate for resilience, right? Over to you, Gaurav.
Thank you, Ashu. Thank you very much. First of all, good morning to all the panelists, and I hope I am audible and my video is quite clear. Perfect. As I said, thank you very much. And on behalf of Tata Tele Business Services, I really want to thank all the people who have joined in for this conclave, and obviously the panelists who are there with me, Rahul, Ravinder, Sanjeev, and I think I missed one person here. So welcome on board. I'm going to be, I mean, honestly, it's not a presentation, but yes, talking about the technologies and talking about the kind of solution that Tata has to offer, I would really like to touch upon some of those solutions which are key for an SME right now. I mean, Ashu, you actually hit the nail on the head. When you said, gone are the days when you talk about an offline technology. I mean, for the last couple of years, we've seen the most, the most rocking time of our lives, starting from converting from a physical meeting to now doing a Zoom meeting, right? Where we're putting up, a background of our choices, where we never had this option before, right? So yeah, I mean, and obviously Tata Tele Business Services has been a leader, has been a pioneer in terms of providing solutions, technology, all those big words to the SMEs, which are quite critical at this point of time, considering the kind of flexible or the hybrid environment that we guys are working on. So I'll quickly take 15-20 minutes to talk about some of the key products and solutions that we have to offer as an organization, and which are critical for an SME to elevate in terms of their digital transformation journey, right? So let me just try and share my screen. Okay, I think the technical team needs to enable my share screen option, please. I see. In the meantime, they do that. Let me just quickly talk about Tata's product lineup that we guys have been offering. So starting from the telecom needs of an SME, which could be internet lease line to the smart VPNs, then moving on to the information technology products like fleet tracking, smart tracking, and then finally moving into the new age product lineups like a cybersecurity or a smart flow. These are the product that we guys are talking about here. Let me just try again. Okay, Farhan and Fahim, anybody if needs to enable my screen sharing. I'm not able to share my screen. So can help me out, please. Okay, now I'm able to do that. Perfect. Right. So let me just try and do that. Okay, perfect. Okay, as they say, just setting up the context of this whole presentation, which says building business resilience with innovative IT solutions. And as they say, the audio visual combination talks about, gives a far more impression than probably me talking. So let's just start with a quick product video that we have, right? Or maybe a quick product bouquet video that we have. I hope it is audible for you.
Um,
Yeah, so as you saw, right? I mean, Tata Tele Business Services, we as an organization, we started off as a telecom player in the market. Everybody knows about it. But with the age of, with the change in the technology, with the flexible timings coming into the picture, with this pandemic, everything has moved so fast. We also have adapted, in terms of our technology, in terms of our product lineup. From a typical telecom player, now you will see Tata Tele Business Services moving into a lot of plug and play products, right? Starting from, as I said, maybe an IoT, maybe a cybersecurity, maybe a cloud communication suite. So a lot of things to offer to SME. And the best part of all these solutions or our organization like Tata Tele Business Services has is that we need to understand and every SME is very unique. Is in nature, right? I mean, an SME who's working out of, let's say, Maharashtra will have different challenges in terms of technology, in terms of digital transformation than an SME working in, let's say, Uttar Pradesh or maybe in Delhi, right? And that's where we as a telecom player or we as a solution provider come into the picture and have to offer a customized solution for all the SMEs. So quickly going through some of the solution portfolios that we have. I'll not talk about all of these, because of the time, but I'll quickly touch upon some of the key product lineups that we have for all the SMEs, working across the country. smart VPN, cybersecurity, IoT solutions, and then smart communication, right? So quickly talking about smart VPN, what it does, how it actually helps an SME. Clearly, it connects your business networks from anywhere across locations. You have a business, or let's say one office running in somewhere in Noida, some office running in, let's say, in Mumbai, some office running somewhere else. We are ensuring that your business is connected throughout. We are also ensuring that the low cost connectivity is done through a managed security cloud, and obviously a remote branch connectivity, even on the LTE SIM. That is something that we have to offer for a smart VPN solution. And then finally, ensuring that it is a secure network that we are offering in terms of this whole this whole solution portfolio. That's about smart VPN, which is quite critical for an SME, considering that they have small offices across the geography. And the business challenge is that how do I connect all these business offices, all these offices on one secure platform? That is where smart VPN comes into the picture. Uh, Quickly talking about another very critical product portfolio of cybersecurity that Tata Tele Business Services has to offer. It's a very interesting topic. I can talk about it probably an hour on this, but just to quickly sum it up, there is a study which says by 2030 we as an as a world, as a community, will have a cybersecurity attack which is going to be worth more than $50 trillion, right? So we're talking about cybersecurity attacks on maybe an SME to a large organization, and we have seen that in the past 3 4 years, specifically when we have started working from home, when we have started working in a hybrid environment. There's a lot of transaction of data going in, going out. We are using home Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi, and various other things, and the data ultimately is not safe. For ensuring that we as an organization have actually come together with industry leaders across the platform and are offering a portfolio which is an end-to-end end-to-end protection for your organization, starting from your endpoint security. When I say endpoint security, I'm talking about security for your hardware, which could be a laptop, desktop, tablets, and then moving on, which would be your email security. As an organization or as an employee, we tend to latch on to any email that comes in without even looking at it, whether it's a phishing email or it's a genuine email. So ensuring that your emails are also safe in the organization, ensuring that whatever website, whatever surfing, or whatever searches that you do are safe and secure from an organizational point of view, thus offering a web security as a solution as well. And then very clearly a virtual firewall. Most of the organization do have a firewall, but along with the cybersecurity portfolio, we do offer a virtual firewall along with it, and a very specific multi authentication factor, which means that if anybody as an employee or as a partner is logging onto your critical data, he will have to authentify himself to get onto any kind of a data requirement that he has. So the cybersecurity is a very critical product portfolio that Tata Tele Business Services is offering at this point of time to the SMEs across the country. And to say that we've got almost 40,000 customers, you know, who are actually getting benefited out of Tata Tele Business Services product across the country. Quickly moving on to some of the interesting IoT solutions. Ashu, you also talked about, again, the days are gone, the offline things are absolutely, nowhere anyways. Starting from, maybe our meeting where we're talking on a Zoom. Otherwise, we would have had this meeting, let's say, in a nice hotel, sipping a coffee across the table and talking about, our journal case studies, what are the solutions, what are the business challenges that everybody's facing. Similarly, on those lines, Tata has also evolved in terms of its product portfolio, where we are offering an IoT solutions, which is basically an end-to-end managed services to ensure that your SMEs are available and are online across 24/7. Starting from your smart fleet tracking, specifically for organizations who are into logistics, who need to ensure where from the time of origin of the product till the delivery of the product, they need to maintain and they need to actually ensure the tracking of those of all their fleets of all their products. That is something we are offering as a product for them. And then for education segment in the IoT portfolio, we have school bus tracking as a portfolio, as a product portfolio. Similarly, considering the hybrid work environment that we guys are into right now, there's something called workforce tracking, where we can ensure the employee productivity in terms of where they are working right now, what's their timing, what's been their overall productivity throughout the day. And then the use cases can vary up to maybe a marketing research organization, service provider, logistics organization, and various other things. And similarly, in the IoT portfolio, we have something called asset tracking, which I talked about. um, any organization who's into multi-stage processing, maybe a change of hands for the product or any high value asset tracking, can actually leverage this portfolio or this product lineup for their own for their own productivity environment. uh, Clearly it's a combination of a hardware and a software, and but as an organization, Tata Tele Business Services, we are managing this end to end, providing the solutions, the hardware, the solutions, and finally the servicing to it. So that's about the IoT portfolio. I'll come to a very interesting product that we guys have been offering to the SMEs right now, which is a smart flow, which we call it a cloud communication suite, which is actually a need of the hour. Any organization any SME who is actually into a contact center, who has a single number which they offer to their customers in terms of, let's say, a customer service number or a reach out number, they need to have this product as a part of their portfolio, because this allows them to connect to their customers 24/7, 365, without any without any boundaries at this point. So clearly, let's look at some of the smart. So as you can see, it has a missed call solution, anytime, anywhere communication. You can actually get a complete business intelligence through this portfolio, ensuring that this portfolio or this product actually reduces your operational cost and your capital cost, because most of your services is through cloud, ensuring that there is a security and reliability. Being Tata as one of the most reliable product player in the market, and the best part is it is actually scalable as per the customer's need. So you don't need to buy a whole suite of the product. You can actually scale it up as per your demand and as per your needs. So I can go about I can talk about smart flow for a length of time, but for the paucity of time, I'll just quickly share some awards that we've been able to collect throughout the last year, where SmartFlow has been actually recognized as the CIO Select Award for the last year in terms of providing cloud communication suite to the SMEs. Uh, you know, and a lot of SMEs, Ashu, and me and Tanjeet work very closely with some of our customers and partners. We talk about what are the simple guidelines that any SME can think of when choosing for a technology, right? So I would just simply give, let's say, 3 or 4 guidelines for an SME to think about. One, number one is that please rent it, do not own it. For an SME, it's a burden. I would say, I mean, for the lack of word, I would say it's a burden, but also a huge cost in terms of investing into technology and their infra. So I would request them rent the technology rather than owning it. Similarly, select fit for purpose. What I mean by that is that every SME is very unique in nature, as I talked about it earlier. So ensure that you choose a or technology partner who understands your need, who understands your problem, rather than a fit for all solution, right? So please select your solution partner based on the problems or the business challenges that you have. Third, bill as you grow, pay as you use, right? I mean, ensure that you do not put yourself under a cost pressure. Ensure that because ultimately your unused capacity is costly. So ensure that your capex is kept low, and you only bill or you pay as you grow as per your needs. Also, very important guideline for an SME I would talk about is look for an integrated solution. Look for a partner. Look for a organization who can help you with an integrated solution, right? Don't go for a product or a solution from one party, second party, third party, or fourth party. Look for somebody who can give you a solution in a box which fits your purpose, so that you only have one person to reach out to, one organization to reach out to in case of any downtime, in case of any particular challenges. And obviously, very clearly, an SME requires a handhold support throughout their, throughout the business cycle. So ensure you choose a partner who's there with you in terms of your support, and no better than Tata in that sense, right? So I'll quickly maybe wrap it up because of the time. But clearly, Tata Tele Business Services at this point of time has to offer a lot of technology solutions, specifically coming from this hybrid model that everybody has been started working in. Feel free to connect with us, after this presentation or after this session. I'll be more than happy to answer. Thank you, Ashu. Thank you very much for your time on this.
Gaurav. I'd request the technical team to close the presentation, please. Gaurav, thank you so much for doing this, right? I mean, we talked to many founders, right, across SMEs, MSMEs, large corporate startups, right, day in day out, right, and through the course of our conversation, we actually talked to them about a lot of problems that they face, right, and some of the solutions that they kind of highlighted are just so much more relevant in that context, right, and I'm you know and trust you me, across this conversation, it's just such a big pain, right, to identify vendors, who can really come in and, I mean, they'll end up dealing with, 20 vendors, right, which is a huge problem in that context, right. And I think reliability, again, depending, it's a huge risk that you're absorbing, and it's somebody else's risk that you're absorbing in your business environment, right, which is extremely complex, right, given
Absolutely.
the kind of dynamics that we're going to get into, right. So thank you so much for making that presentation, Gaurav. I'm gonna talk to you more about that through the course of our panel, right. But ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you join us at this panel discussion, where we're joined by uh, some amazing people, right. I have mentioned about them. They are with us now. I want them to do a quick round of introduction. I'll start with Ravinder Pal Singh ji. Ravinder Pal Singh ji, if you could do a quick round of introduction, it becomes very interesting to for us to start the conversation.
Sure. And good morning once again, everyone. My name is Ravinder Pal Singh. By way of introduction, as of now, I had two digital transformation setups, one in
Sure.
India, which is called Mercado Technologies, and one in Dubai, which is called Gokadal Technologies. And we are purely into digital transformation consulting and cloud solutions. And just to give you an idea about my background, I spent 26 years in industry working with three major companies, Cisco, Dell, and Wipro. Right. And as part of my engagement with these companies, I have been involved with digital transformation, especially on IoT, artificial intelligence, smart cities, and emerging businesses for the last 17 to 18 years. And in these 17, 18 years, one thing which I have also learned and helped customers and organizations with is that there's no escape from digital transformation, and it has to be there. So during the course of panel, I'll shed more light on that. So good to be here and look forward to it.
It's a pleasure to have you with us, right? It's a pleasure to have you with us. Rahul, a quick round of introduction will be very helpful.
Hi, I'm Rahul Kale. I'm an entrepreneur. I started my own business about 15 years back, sold that, and I'm still involved in the manufacturing part of it. It was in the beauty and Ayurveda space.
Right.
But for the past 2 years, I've been involved with a number of micro and small entrepreneurs, where we are skilling, training, and mentoring them, understanding what their needs are and how to help them scale up and grow and survive in this market. So I've been working with a number of these small and micro entrepreneurs, and I'd be happy today to talk more about from the perspective of small and micro entrepreneurs and understanding how their needs and what the future holds for them.
No, Rahul, I think it's a pleasure to have you with us. I think a lot of what you're talking about, I think we're going to be discussing a lot of this, through the course of the conversation, right? And I'm looking forward to a very interesting, bunch of points and questions, right, for you through the course of the conversation. Nishant, a quick round of introduction will be very helpful.
Yeah, so Nishant here. I am my background is all working with companies like Cisco in cloud telephony and then a digital transformation. And now we started this company, IoT83. I'm the founding member of the company based out of California.
Right.
So the company is in California and we are offering IoT platform. So by the name of the company, so it's just that we are offering IoT platform and seeing a lot of traction coming in. yeah, so that's what we are into.
Very interesting. I'm going to come to Tanjeet. Tanjeet, you know, we know what you do, right? But I think a good round, quick round of introduction will be very helpful. I think you're really a savior, right, in many ways, right? Tell us a little more. A round of introduction will be very helpful.
Yeah, good morning, Ashu, and good morning to all the panel members. It's good to have a virtual interaction with all the experts from the market over here today and to talk about more on the part of the digital transformation and the innovation which has been happening into the market. Just to give you the snapshot who I am, I've been working with this organization for last 10 years. I'm taking care of the part of sales for North region. While we've been working in this organization for last 10 years, 2 years has been really a roller coaster ride for all of us, considering the fact of the COVID has really dented us badly. But having said that, the kind of thought every organization has on the part of being a digital organization. So this disruption really gave us the edge, and we actually executed the plan into the market. And to execute this plan, I think so the telecom has played a really vital role. So I'm going to talk about on this part how we really helped out the organization to talk about more on the part of the journey they had and the kind of the actual challenges they had and how we supported them on that particular part. So we'll have the more on the part of the discussion during this panel discussion. So we're talking about Mr. Ravinder, who's been there into the part of the digital transformation where he's taking care on that particular part. Having said that, Mr. Rahul has said that they are really into the part of the micro SME. So we understand the pain areas of such the micro SMEs, what they look out to it, since the education as well as from the part of scale is really important for any of the organization. Absolutely. So that's where we play the role. So I take care of the part of the SME. So surely we'll have the fair interaction.
Ajit, I'm looking forward to doing discussing some case studies, right? I think because these have been very interesting times, and I think you can pick up a lot of references from what other say organizations have done, right, and build it into your own, right? Gaurav, you introduced yourself. You did a beautiful presentation, right? But a quick round of introduction will still be helpful.
That's what happens when you're actually trying to present something, you forget to introduce yourself. So I really apologize for that, panelist. And thank you, Ashu, for bringing this up. My name is Gaurav Vashne. I am, I'm basically heading the marketing function for Tata Tele Business Services for North and East. It's been almost 15, 16 years of doing marketing, trying to work with customers, with partners across the country. And as Tanjeet also said, and Mr. Rahul also talked about it, I think it's been a couple of challenging years in terms of marketing as well, to talk about some of the new innovation technique that an organization can think about in terms of marketing. Right. But yes, it's been great and good to be among such a panelist.
Super. So I think we're gonna dive straight into our discussion today, right? And like I said, this is going to be an exciting discussion because we have some amazing founders, entrepreneurs, professionals, right, in this discussion, and I think we're going to make it very, very meaningful, right? Because through the course we'll discuss more, like I said, right, more case studies, right, in terms of how it's being adopted. But I think we'll also sort of circle around the sensitivity, which is very important, right? I'm gonna start with my first question, Rahul. I am essentially what I would love to know from you, right? Given what you're doing, right, you're kind of championing the cause of sustainability, of growth, right, of to an extent mentoring, right? Many micro entrepreneurs. You've been an entrepreneur yourself, right? This has been an extremely sensitive segment, right? This has been a segment which was not necessarily prepared for a COVID-like event, right? When you think of SMEs, MSMEs, micro entrepreneurs, right, they continue to defer technology because to their understanding, it adds to the cost of doing business, right? It was, post-COVID that entire sort of thought process has changed, right? Because that was the only way. Technology was actually the only way you could actually go out and communicate with your stakeholders, right? Be it people inside, be it outside, right? I would love to understand from you in terms of the resilience aspect, right? That a lot of organizations through this course could possibly have, right, fight it out because they were smart enough to identify quick hacks, right, quick fixes with technology and weave it into their solutions very quickly, right? Tell me a little more about some of that, right? What is and also your thoughts around it, right? Going forward, how important do you think all this is going to become very, very important?
Rahul. Very interesting, some very interesting points you've raised in this. I think there's two things. That one needs to. Sorry.
No problem, Rahul.
Hello?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry about that. Yeah. So there's two issues really to consider in this. The first issue is that how the industry has changed, how consumer behavior patterns have changed, and how this has impacted the SMEs.
Right.
So that's one part of it to consider. The second is how the needs of the SMEs themselves have changed. So now, if you look at it in terms of consumer behavior and consumer patterns, I think it's very important for SMEs to know whether there have been fundamental changes in their way of working or it's just a temporary shift in terms of what they're doing. A lot
Right.
of people, panicked and they said, "Oh, the market has changed, the world has changed. We need to completely change our business model." Perhaps they've adapted and transformed a little too fast.
Right.
Perhaps the need to is to really sit back and evaluate whether we need to really change that fast. And if we are changing, then how exactly do we adapt to the new consumer behavior and the new consumer patterns? I'll talk a little bit about that later, perhaps. The other thing is that how have the needs of SMEs changed?
Right.
Like you said, a lot of SMEs didn't have a choice. I mean, they didn't do this out of choice, jumping into the digital thing. It's been a massive acceleration of the digitalization process. So maybe there's a lot of small and micro entrepreneurs. It's like a jump 5 years forward that they had to take. They didn't have a choice. So having done that, what are their needs now? I think on the one hand, everybody's realized that in order to be resilient, you need to reduce your fixed expenses,
Right.
which means enhance productivity. In this, digitization can play a very, very big role. We've seen Gaurav describing a lot of ways in which productivity can be enhanced.
Right.
The second part of it is they're also looking at better ways of interacting with consumers. So they're looking at better CRM models. They're looking at better ways of interacting with consumers, keeping in touch with them, building their communities, etc. In this, there's been a big shift in terms of consumer behavior also, because we've seen consumers who were earlier who hadn't even heard of the word webinar or they hadn't heard of knowledge series, etc. They're jumping into it now and they're all open to these kind of things. So it represents a very big opportunities for small companies to interact with consumers.
Right.
Similarly, it also opens up a lot of ways for them to find access to new markets.
Right.
They're looking at ways of accessing new markets with very, very much reduced cost. Earlier, it was the owner or the director had to travel. If it's a B2B business, meet consumers one-on-one, do presentations, follow-ups, etc. Now there's all kinds of ways in which they can reach out to consumers sitting in their own office.
Right.
So it represents a very, very, very big opportunity for small and micro entrepreneurs. And how they take to this really depends on them. We've seen a lot of companies adapting very, very well. I mean, they've jumped into this, they've utilized the last 1.5 years very effectively, and they've adapted this. We've also seen a lot of people just struggling because they're completely clueless about how to go about it henceforward. And I think if we understand the needs of these SMEs, it would really help create a very nice environment for the future and understand their needs.
Interesting. Rahul, there are like a bunch of very interesting points that you highlighted, right? And I would want to sort of dig further on some of those points right through the course of the conversation, right? But I think one thing which is very clear, and I think something that like I said, at the outset of the conversation, we're discussing with many, many people, right? Is that, the consumer landscape has kind of changed, right? Which essentially means that the pressure on delivery is going to be very, very different, right? Be it a B2B delivery, because eventually somebody is going to face the consumer, right? So even if you are, for example, a B2B player, there's going to be, a certain delivery pressure on you because, like I said, the environment has become more agile. It's become more dynamic, right? Consumer preferences are going to become a lot more dynamic, right? So, in line with that, I'm going to come to you in just a bit, right? And we're going to discuss some of those aspects, right? In terms of, what COVID has done, how the consumer behavior is going to change and all that, right? But, I'm going to come to Mr. Singh, right? Mr. Singh, you've been kind of, you're in an environment where you're dealing with many, businesses, right? You're essentially empowering them to become, technology friendly. You're basically helping them adopt better. What has also happened during this time is that a lot of innovation has happened, right? Organizations, for example, like Tata Tele and some independent individual players, right? They've been able to construct very smart solutions, right, in the process. Now, typically in an environment where, there was no reference or no previous record of interaction with any technology, right? How has that adoption been, right? And what are your thoughts on this, right? Have people struggled, and was this a phase which was early on and now it's kind of settling in? Or do you think a large percentage of people still continue to struggle with this kind of environment, right? Mr. Ravinder Pal Singh, I'd love you to answer on this one.
Yeah, sure. So, to answer that, I want to just use a phrase here. So, we have been talking about disruption, and technology has been a disruptor.
Right.
And I have in fact authored a paper on this where we talk about 3 waves of disruption. So, when we had first wave, when the word computerization happened in India, it started mid of 80s till when companies were asked to adopt computerization, there was a big push. There was a big push, and there's a story that in 1987, when the then Rajiv Gandhi government wanted to computerize all the banks, there was one of the biggest strikes happened in banking industry of this country. I think for 4 days, all the banks were closed because bank employees felt that introduction of computers would mean losing of jobs, right? So there was a big push, and the first wave of computerization took close to 8 to 10 years to be acceptable to everybody. It took almost 10 years, maybe a decade. The second wave, which came with the introduction of internet, it happened a bit faster because people had already realized and people felt that internet is giving them a tool to connect. And then the smartphone came, and it became so easy that the second wave of disruption disrupted almost every vertical, and it took less than 4 years. And one of the example we can use, since we're talking about Tata Teleservices, is the connectivity. It happened so fast in this country, the acceptance of mobile. Within 3 to 4 years, we had a large number of population having mobiles. The third wave, which is with 4 A's, as I call it: the artificial intelligence, the automation, the analytics, and augmentative. These 4 A's are impacting every technology. Now, since you asked this question, is everybody accepting or everybody easy? No. And there are 2 pointers I want to state here. The first pointer is, as per industry leaders, you talk to John Chamber, you talk to Mr. The Hathaway guy, I immediately forget his name, and everybody else. Everybody says that 90% plus CEOs understand if they do not adopt digital transformation or technology transformation, they are out of business. They cannot survive. Right. But there's a fact, and this was done through a survey by MIT Sloan. It says only 15% of CEOs are executing this. What happens to 75%? The problem with those 75% is they don't know what to do. Right. And that is where the problem is. Just adopting a technology is not going to solve your problem. You need to have a thought process behind that. You need to have enterprise architecture, because today technology is not only a tool. It is connecting every business function, every business processes. So if you are not having an enterprise-wide strategy for digital transformation, then what happens is, another survey says 39% of digital transformation efforts fail. And that is the reason for that. So when it comes to SMEs, my recommendation is that before they just adopt a tool, they just buy a tool, they need to have a thought through strategy around that, because ultimately it's going to run their business. They're not going to run technology. Technology is going to run their business.
Right. Very interesting point that you highlighted, Mr. Singh, right? And I'm gonna come to you on a bunch of other things, right? Because like I said, like Rahul, for example, touched upon some very important aspects. You touched upon some very important aspects. And I think one thing which completely stands out in your case, right? I think you're highlighting around mindset, right? And I think mindset shift is very, very important and significant. And I think India as a market, I think that's essentially the biggest struggle, right? And I'm going to bring in Tanjeet on this point, right? I mean, Tanjeet, you've been somebody who's been on the field, right? Who's been on the go, who's essentially been working very closely with many of these clients, customers, right? And my sense is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Tata Tele deals with upwards of 40,000 customers, right? SMEs, MSMEs across the country, right? Tanjeet, you've been at it, right? What are some of those challenges that you've realized? I mean, I'd love to understand possibly one case study that you could pick up, right? Which you think is a classical representation of where India stands, right? Where Indian SME stands, right? And how important is it to weave in technology and much faster than how we anticipate, right? Because that is where that's what it's going to be dependent on. I mean, their ability to service their clients and customers, right, is largely a function of how quickly do they adopt, right? And COVID has been a very it's been an aberration, but I think we need to brace ourselves and prepare ourselves for such aberrations, right? Business going forward is going to essentially happen digitally, right? Some of the points that have been highlighted through the course of our conversation, right? I'd love to hear from you. What has been your experience and a case study? I think it's going to be very, very helpful to put a lot of what we're saying in perspective?
So Ashu, I'll divide my discussion in two parts. One is, rightly picked up by Mr. Ravinder that, in any of the organization really wanted to move, they really need to understand and introspect on the part of the strategy first, where they wanted to move ahead on that part. So as an organization first, I wanted to touch upon on my organization first, how we move. So when this pandemic broke out and, we have been talking that we wanted to move digital. So as a journey on a digital perspective, how you wanted to execute the plan, right? That was the most important factor for us. So we decided on a three ways. One is the part of how we can be faster, how can be simpler, and how we can do the closure on immediate basis. So to do so, first we really had to be as an organization to be digitally adopted, since it comes under the supervision of DOT. So there is a lot of paperwork which is being required from us, from the customer end. So that is something, one of the, the gray area which we had. So we moved ourselves into the digital platform on that particular part. That's the one thing which we did that. So how, this helped to the end customer, because since it moved to the digitally, so I don't require a, the touch point with the physical touch point with the customer. It's more on a digital perspective where, the papers has gone to customer and he can sign it and everything is done. That's one. Second, on the part that, since we are doing 90% of business through channel partners, so we need to make our partners digital savvy as well. So we moved a lot of processes, lot of internal systems on the digital platform. So which is like plug and play scenario, or like it's like we removed a lot of internal hurdles into a number of levels which we had. So that really gives an edge to us when we are moving into the moving into the market on a faster perspective, and made life very simple for our channel partners as well. Look, this is something which has been that you can do that. Third is the prospect that we decided that what exactly the customer requires into the market. Since the pandemic broke out, and when a lot of people, customers move from work from home concept, they really wanted to have the products which is like very simple to understand. Which is like, if I'll just ask, 10-year-old guy or 12-year-old kid as well, that, if you need to start the Microsoft Teams or Zoom, they can do that. Can we do some sort of a, such kind of a product like line where I don't require a technical guy to, to guide me on this prospect? So that's where, the more of a, the era which has started for us. I've been in this organization for last 10 years, but mind you, for last 2 years, the kind of the diversification we have done to ourselves in terms of the product line is way ahead. Talking about on the network perspective, or you're moving to the part of the cloud services on the voice part, or maybe the unified communication space. These are the products which are like, plug and play kind of a scenario. So anybody can use it at any time. And it's like the second question which will be asked to us is the other option, the other problem statement with the SME is on the part of the cost. So can we, bring the products which are, very cost savvy, and, there is not much of a capex, which is very like more on a, the plug and play scenario, and, pay as per usage model. So that's where, again, we've simplified this, which helped us to, the close the things on an immediate basis. Apart from this, since, the pandemic broke out, we never realized that we have, so much laws within our organization, within the country. We have a lockdown in UP, but you don't find a lockdown in Gurgaon. Right. But you find a lockdown in, Delhi, but you don't find a lockdown in maybe in, the Faridabad. Absolutely. And then, you need to, and every organization was looking for to ensure that, their systems are up and running, their business is smooth. And juggling it out, the manpower was really a key, the problem statement which we had. But, with the fact of, the right set of planning and right stuff of, the upgradation of our network and ensuring that it is up and running really helped us, to sustain our customers, as well as we ensure that their, the business continuity, goes well in line. Now you talk about on the part of the journey on the second part, the case study, if you ask about to us, every customer, is a case study for us. You talk about any of the BPOs, they had this, the concept, the physical. Now look at out the maximum BPOs have, thinking about on the line of, they move to, the hybrid model. They wanted to have a, the work from home as well as the on the part of physical, executives coming to the office. The second factor, how they did that, because we have a smart flow as a telephony of the services or a secure VPN or the cyber security is what Gaurav has talked about. These are the products really enabled us. So just to give you the example, we launched our, the smart flow product line in the month of December 2020. right? And we started off with the 5 customers. So today we are catering more than 1,500 customers. So imagine the scale which has happened. The adoption is very much there in the the market as well on that part. Second, when you talk about the other the case study, you talk about the house, the diagnostic centers, or the hospitals, or the the government agencies. They really knocked our doors and asked us to support on that particular path. Because the diagnosis centers were getting the license to get the COVID test done. And there is a license process which they have is, if you have a license for Delhi, you can't do the testing in Noida. So you will find a different diagnostic center. You will find if somebody has got the license in Gurgaon, he cannot do the testing in Noida. So then that's why the kind of distribution of licenses happened in the market with some of the diagnostic centers. They came to us and said, "Boss, we really wanted to have a business continuity. How you can help us out on that?" So we really enabled that. There was a lot of these solutions which was being enabled. Frankly speaking, we learned a lot, and that's where our journey also started as an organization. So we have a very clear vision. We want to be a no longer a the typical network service provider into the market. We are carrying the entire bouquet of the product line, which can enable any of the SME or any of the SOHO customer to start his business in 24 hours. That kind of a product lines which we have now.
But Tanjeet, I think interesting that you highlight that, right? I think because I think going forward, the role of any enabler is going to be that of almost a partner, right? And I think something that you've kind of taken as an approach that you've taken, right? I don't think it's going to be off the rack. I think there's going to be a lot of customization which is going to be required. I think there's a lot of understanding that you'll have to build, right? And I think that is essentially what I make out of what you're saying, right? And possibly kind of environment that you're saying, which was essentially broken, right? And something that you really can't do anything about, right? But you can really only optimize it and efficiently deliver through technology, right? And that's a kind of what you kind of alluding to in the process, right? Nishant, I'm going to come to you, right? I think and it's in when we talk of COVID, when we talk about all of these issues that businesses have been facing, right? One issue that becomes is that of a broken team or a distributed team, right? And you are essentially here where you're working with representation across various areas, right? It becomes difficult to build. I mean, how do you calibrate for resilience, for example, or how do you calibrate for a comeback in an environment like this, which is extremely disruptive, right? When you're working with multiple offices, when you're working with distributed teams, right? It is just so much more difficult, right? I'd love to hear from you in the sense that, what are some of the things that you did to ensure that there was continuity in delivery, continuity in communication, which was there with your team? What are some of those things that happened at your end?
Yeah, so basically, just to talk about that point, now it's not only a few offices. Now you have let's say 100 employees. Sure. Everyone working from home. So for you, it's 100 office, right? So you have 100 distributed system, and then you need to take care of the security because they have their own systems, right? They're working from their own home network, and you're not sure who may snoop in, right? And then they may get access to your company data and all. So yeah, so we implemented solutions, and then as you mentioned, right? So, and I think as Gaurav also talked about, so it's always better to rent a technology rather than getting into it, because eventually the cost of doing that, right, that becomes very high. So if you are depending on someone who is already there and then they are offering as a service, right? So wherein you are renting that and you are enjoying the benefits of that, right? So for example, let's say I want to set up a telephony now. So I may have a choice to set up a SIP trunk. I get to a provider, I get a lease line, and then set up all that. Rather, I have an option to go for a cloud telephony service, right? So that would always make more sense. And then just to give a very short idea about with our customers as well, right? So what we have seen is talking to at least 200 plus executives. They are pretty open moving to cloud systems because any day if you set up your own data center, right, you may not be able to reach to a level wherein, let's say for that matter, Tata, right? So Tata may have their own data centers. You can't reach to a level where they have, right, with the scale they have. So it makes more sense to invest in those technologies, renting that out, building your system more, or rather building your environment more strong enough, implementing all of these technologies. So these were some of the key things that we also did, having all of these VPNs and then the secure environment for our 80 plus employees, right? So
very interesting. Gaurav, I'm going to come to you, right? I think I think Sanjeev kind of referred to about it in a certain common way, right? But I think if I'm to take a step back, right, and Sanjeev is essentially in a position where he's dealing with customers and his team is dealing with customers day in day out, right? You're somebody who's as operates at a certain distance, right? It just becomes important to essentially calibrate it right and for them to deliver it right, right? Uh, in an environment that we've seen, right, pretty much everything got disrupted, right? Now, what do you do? I mean, communication becomes very, very important. Understanding somebody's problem becomes very, very important, right? Like I alluded to it, right? Consultation becomes important, right? I mean, you really can't have a cold stack of products, right? Which you kind of do. Your role changed in the process, right? Your role changed to that of, being that evangelist, if I can call it that, right? To essentially help these business get to the other side of, the water, right? Uh, Building business resilience became very core to it, right? I think which is now also an ethos that you're kind of practicing, right? Tell us a little more about that, right? I mean, what are some of those practices that you've kind of brought in, built in, right? And the sensitivity which you're kind of approaching, many stakeholders, right? Who you think are going to need this kind of support system to, continue to do their business in a regular fashion, the way it existed before a pandemic.
Sure. I mean, great question, Ashu. But I just want to touch upon what Mr. Ravindra Pal Singh said,
Sure.
some time back, and in fact, you also touched upon it. 90% of the SMEs or the SME owners or the CEOs think about the digital transformation as the key objective, right? But only 15% do it. And Mr. Ravindra Pal very clearly said, where is the 75%? What is the gap then, or where is the gap? I think the gap lies between a typical a technology provider and a consultant, right?
Mhm.
There are two people, there are two ways to look at it. One, an organization who would just provide you a technology and say, okay, I'm done here, let me just go back to whatever my own office and think about some other customers. And then there is something called consultant who will
Right.
ensure for an SME that they handhold that SME and actually start the journey from building the infrastructure to delivering and probably giving you the productivity that you need, right?
Right.
I think the consultation is very important in this case. Coming back to your question in terms of business resilience, I mean, my answer might sound like a bit cliche, but there are four factors that I would touch upon in terms of
Please.
business resilience. Uh, One, very clearly, how do you do a business resilience in your organization is by focusing on your people, right? Because at the end of the day, people are the foundation of any business
Right.
resilience. Ensure that you trust them, you empower your people in terms of your your in terms of their jobs. Communicate clearly with them in terms of what they need to do, what are their deliverables, where are they standing right now, and then obviously providing them the tools to do it, right?
Mhm.
The second methodology, or the second pillar that I want to talk about in terms of business resilience would be supporting our partners, right?
Right.
As an organization, Tata has been great in that terms, right? We've been able to support our partners in this in the last 2 years of pandemic. We've been able to reach out to them in terms of what all technological changes we are doing. As Punjit also mentioned, a lot of processes has gone under a huge
Sure.
transformation from a physical paper to a digital movement, ensuring that you're providing them a bit of financial health as well in terms of taking their burden off. Third important thing for an SME when they talk about a business resilience is ensuring or safeguarding their own technology, right?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, technology is something that you need, that can protect you, or if you expose it, it'll take you to a, it can actually be a very, very big risk for a small SME. Now
Right.
imagine an SME who's basically into, let's say auto part manufacturing for, I don't know, maybe for a big car manufacturer. What happens if their data get lost, right? What happens if if there is some kind of a cyber attack on that SME? I mean, you're talking about not only the financial loss, you're basically talking about a reputation loss for
Right.
that organization and for obviously the bigger player as well.
Right.
Fourth pillar that I want to talk about for the business resilience that we actually suggest to our SME friends is plan for sustainability, right? They need to ensure that they invest into the sustainability, right? They need to ensure maybe a flexible workforce, a succession planning, or maybe a disaster recovery efforts, which could be plugging in right people at the right jobs. So I think these 4 5 pillars to me are very critical in terms of ensuring a business resilience, specifically at this time where things are I mean a little bit here and there. Although we are talking about in fact in today's newspaper itself, we're talking about economy being back on track in the next 6 to 8 months, which I'm sure will happen. considering the kind of efforts and considering the kind of things people are putting in. But still, we need to plan for our sustainability as well. So I think
that's a very interesting point. That's a very interesting point, Gaurav. And I think you've touched upon many very interesting aspects, right? And I think point of views that you kind of bring into the table. I'm going to move to environment which is beyond pandemic, right? And I think it becomes important. I think we've been discussing this time again, right? I think there's a disruption that has happened. It's kind of set in some certain habits, right? And I think it's just become very important for business to adopt technology, right? I think that's an established fact, right? I think, but is this something which is going to go on to stay? Is this something which is going to go on to become a critical aspect of businesses, right? Rahul, I'm going to come to you to understand a little bit of that, right? Now, what has happened is that we've seen that all of a sudden when kind of pandemic hit, right, there was a lot of disruption that had happened, right? There was people didn't know what to do, what not to do, and something that we've covered across many points, right? Sanjeev alluded to it. Nishant spoke of it. Mr. Singh sort of spoke about it. You spoke about it, right? Everybody spoke about it, right? In terms of what had happened. Now, one big factor which is now, Gaurav actually walked me into this question, right? Literally, in the sense, when he said that 6 months, 8 months, the economy is going to be back to normal, right? Now, what essentially is happening is that as an economy, we are very heavily invested in the infrastructure that we created, right? And feeding into the inefficiencies that the system sort of created, right? Last 1.5, 2 years has been kind of like I said, an aberration, right? But with the 6 months that we are kind of looking at, 8 months that we're looking at, I mean, certain countries have already sort of opened up economies, right? For masks to not necessary, larger percentage of the population is now kind of vaccinated, right? We're essentially getting there, right? All of us are itching to go back, right? What do you think is going to be the role of technology, especially in the context of SMEs, MSMEs? Do you think, is this something which is going to continue? All of adoption that has happened, is this something which is going to continue? Or do you think it's going to be treated differently? Our priorities could just change, right? And this would possibly be considered to be an aberration. And an Indian entrepreneur has a tendency to go back, right? I mean, this is something that we're seeing in education as an industry. This is something that we're seeing in manufacturing as an industry. This is something that we're seeing, like I said, across many industries, right? Where people are itching to go back. What's your sense of, how will technology play out beyond this period, right? Next 6 to 8 months and beyond, what's going to be the role of technology in the industry?
I think very interesting, actually, the way the discussion is going. In terms of trends and in terms of consumer behavior, I think there are certain trends that we've seen that were already growing, and they've just gotten a boost by the pandemic. Sure. And these are trends that are going to stay. Like if we talk about delivery services, these things have come to be a part of our life. I mean, they've taken a tremendous boost, whether we talk about food delivery or we talk about groceries or whatever you may say.
Right.
These are trends that are there. They're going to stay. They've gotten a massive boost. They might taper out. The growth might not be the same what it has been in the past 1.5 years, but we've become too used to these things now. They're going to stay. There are certain trends which are displacements. I mean, if you talk about, say, sanitizers, for example, I'm just talking from my industry point of view. I hope sanitizers are not going to be a part of our life moving forward after a couple of months and everything also.
Well, I hope they do.
Really? Okay. And there are some things that have just catalyzed and moved ahead, which we've seen that they've come to be a part of our life.
Right.
These are innovations. They're there, but we've just become too used to it now.
Right.
So it would be very interesting to understand what are those things which are temporary displacements, right. What are those things that have received a big boost, and what are those things that have come to be a fundamental part of our life now. If you talk about it from a point of view of IT and SMEs, if you look at communication, if you look at interacting with consumers, I think it's opened up a number of different ways in which we can do these things. There are certain things that we would love to go back to physical. I mean, if you talk about physical shopping experiences or you talk about interacting with products, etc., we'd love to go back and do things the old way. But there are many ways in which we can, these changes have come to be a fundamental part of the ecosystem, and SMEs would have to adapt to them and grow with them. We've seen a lot of discussion about a number of different ways that we can adopt, and they would have to sort of adapt to these and make them a part of their existence.
Well, Rahul, an offshoot of this question, right? This was not necessarily part of the, the stack of questions that I had, set up for you, right? But how important is cost sensitivity, right? Because, like I said, right, I mean, we were essentially feeding into a lot of inefficiencies, right? We created, for example, a lot of infrastructure, which now has become redundant. I mean, the fact that we don't need offices, I mean, we're going to talk a little more about that as we go along, right? But I mean, businesses have essentially designed around these inefficiencies, right? For example, rentals. Now, today, for example, you don't have to pay rentals. I mean, you can now do away with, Nishant kind of mentioned of it, right? That you have large distributed teams, that are operating from wherever, right? You have 100 different offices, right? I mean, that's a luxury, right? One. Second, for example, a lot of travel time, a lot of other things, right? A lot of inefficiencies that were part of the system have kind of now been weeded out, right? Do you think, and that is resulting into a lot of bottom line contribution, that do you think that is sensitivity which is now, across SMEs, MSMEs as well? Have they been dissecting in that way? Or is this a segment which is itching to go back, right? I have been talking to many SMEs, MSMEs. There are two sets that I see, right? One is second generation, which is progressive, understands technology, wants to sort of, do a bunch of things where technology is going to be a critical normal, right? And then, of course, there are the older horses, right? Who are itching to go back to their base, right? Because that's where they think, that's where they operate out of, that's where people come to meet them, and they want that touch and feel in this, right? What's your sense of it, right? Is the cost sensitivity a horizontal understanding across both of these segments, or do you think, given the diversity that we have, right, as a country, do you think we're going to be a divided house, right? We're going to have a mix of possibly both, or maybe some more options. What's your sense of
I think regardless of which frame of mind they're coming from, people have realized that the businesses that survived and the businesses that thrived in the past 1.5 years, either they had like very, very deep pockets and very huge cash surpluses, or they were the ones who were able to adapt. They were the ones who were able to bring down their fixed costs, and they were able to be very, very sensitive towards their costs, adapt quickly, and move ahead. So regardless of what frame of mind they come from, they know that if such a situation is to arise in the future,
Right.
and we need to adapt to such sudden changes in environment in the future, one will have to be very, very sensitive towards cost, whether it be employee costs or fixed expenses in terms of office rentals and distribution costs, whatever else. People
Right.
have realized that outsourcing a lot of your fixed expenses makes a lot of sense. So regardless of what frame of mind they come from, we've seen a number of businesses that were very, very heavy on fixed expenses and costs, and they've simply not been able to thrive in this environment.
Right.
And resilience is what is really important in these circumstances. So I think cost sensitivity is extremely important,
Right.
and it's going to be a mainstay of how we operate in the future.
Very interesting. Tanjeet, I'm going to come to you, right? I think, there are many, many interesting points that you kind of highlighted, right? And I think going forward, continuity is going to be critical, right? While of course we're talking about SMEs, MSMEs, right? Now a lot of these SMEs, MSMEs essentially operating in a B2B environment, right? Where the larger enterprises, which are their potential customers, or even if they're in a consumer environment, right? The consumer is now started to consume of digital environment, right? Which becomes important for them to, even if they don't choose to, there is a very critical need for them to adopt to technology, right? Continuity is under question, right? How do you see this, this entire, say, dynamic situation play out, right? What's your sense of it? I mean, if you have to break it down, right, how are you going to look at it from a say continuity risk or a discontinuity risk, right? How important do you think a lot of this is going to stay, and it's going to become critical for them to, where they can't afford to avoid using technology in the systems, irrespective of whether the mindset is there or not, right? They'll have to adopt to it because the environment around them is moved, right? What's your sense of it? How do you break it down?
So, Ashu, but the classic example for this particular part, you can see the disruption which has been happening in the education segment.
Right.
So today, I was there last week, I was there in Kota. So
right.
Most of you are aware of it. The Kota is the city which is primarily known for, the IITians and for the exam preparation for the talk about doctors, and you'll find
right.
now you'll find CAs as well. But frankly speaking, I mean, when we went, I mean, we realized that the adoption on the digital perspective has really ruined the city. I would say that.
Right.
And you will find that a lot of the students who were thinking about they really wanted to prepare for the exam, so need to go to Kota and for the preparation and need to stay back for 2 years or 3 years for that particular part. So look at out, how the city has changed. So city has changed. The institutes are, carrying a dent. The PGs are getting a dent. You look at out the restaurants, they are getting a dent. So look at out, how the structure of the city is getting changed.
Right.
So there is a clear, thought that there is a digital adoption is being accepted by the students for the, the part of the education. And look at our own, kids as well. I mean, I have a, 3-year-old kid, and now he's doing his classes on, the Teams, and he knows that, from where he has to mute and from where he has to, start the video. So that really means that, there is a, the continuity is going to be there. Look at out the schools and, the colleges, they have given an option now. So this become a, more of an optional, situation for them. I was talking to one of the university yesterday, and they said it was, I mean, we are, bound to do this. We have to do this, as a continuity, program. And this has really given us an edge as well to, to reach out to the particular market that we never thought of. Now, this is something, which has been very, very critical. Now, the second part of, which is the most important fact for us, as some of the, the panelists also picked it, on the part of Mr. Rahul talked about the consumer behavior, and Nishant also picked up about, the part of the collaboration as well, right? So collaboration is something is gonna to be there for sure. Look at out, maybe as a Tata Tele, or you talk about Cisco, or you talk about any of the big organizations. So if they really wanted to move on the part of the scale perspective, the collaboration is going to pick a very big, the important role into it. Now, on the part of the consumer behaviors, by the virtue of that, do it on my behalf is there in the DNA of, the Indians. So do it on your, do it yourself is something still, the challenge. And Mr. Ravinder also picked up correctly that, the adoption is still not there. Mr. Rahul talked about the still, the booster is already there, but somehow, the adoption, still people say that, I mean, can you do it on my behalf? Can you let me know how you can do it? Despite knowing that, all the, the repository is already available on the digital perspective. So I think still it's a long journey. This is going to be, more on the hybrid model. I would say that on the B2B segment is going to continue for sure. And this is also important because when you do a physical meeting with the customer, and when this pandemic started, we were doing our virtual meetings, and today this, the forum is also there on the virtual platform.
Right.
So the intent is to have the highest number of reach. But when you meet on either the one-to-one basis, then yes, you can sniff out a lot of stuff because then it's a behavior, which Mr. Rahul picked up correctly. It's again a behavior. So when you, I met with, the customer, yesterday, and when I spoke to him, I mean, then he said it. I mean, Mr. Ravinder also picked up us. The companies are looking towards, the digital officer, to be a part of it, right? And then he said it. I mean, when we were having a discussion on the virtual platform, we never had this discussion. But yesterday, when I had a discussion, he said our company has, appointed a CIO, and the thought was we need to take the business on the digital perspective. That was missing, and it's a 40,000 crore, the group. So that kind of, the thought comes when you have a physical video, because there is a lot of behavioral changes you find it. So it's a hybrid model, which is going to continue for sure.
No, I agree with you, Tanjeet. And I think it's going to become a lot more efficient, right? I mean, I think a pure physical environment is not going to solve for it. I think, digital option is definitely better, right? For example, I mean, if say one had to meet, somebody, right? I mean, there's just so much of planning that needs to sort of happen, right? In a digital environment, for example, it's so much easier for all of us to come together, right, and to distribute it so much more smartly, right? So I think it's going to be hybrid, right? I think possibly number of interactions that used to be say 5, 7, 10, right, across say a quarter will possibly reduce to just about one interaction, right? Which of course is kind of result into an extremely clear, I think, expectation map. That's number one. Number two, I think it's only going to enhance adoption, right, and the seriousness of adoption. So I think this is something which is here to stay as a trend. And I kind of concur with what you're saying, right? I'm going to move to Mr. Singh, right? Mr. Singh, one big problem, I think, when you talk of digital transformation, you talk of digital adoption, right, which comes in, right, and you're talking about SMEs, MSMEs. So I think that's true for, I think, people across the board, right? And I think Tanjeet kind of alluded to it, right? In India, we have a problem of too many, right? And we are in a constant zone of assistance, right? We need assistance. We need a touch and feel, right? Which is a good thing and a bad thing, right? But, workforce, to bring them to pace with a lot of what is happening, right? And Rahul, I'd love you to answer this as well, right? And just come to you, post, my question from Mr. Singh, right? Is that workforce takes a lot of time to act and react, right? I mean, leadership has reasons, very clear reasons to do this, right? To adopt the technology. Workforce side adoption is usually a challenge. It becomes tricky, right? People are cut in a different way, right? They've been cut in the way, in the sense that going to office, meeting people, interactions, right? A lot of this used to happen offline, and from that all of a sudden to doing in a very digital kind of environment. That's number one. Number two, doing it consistently, right? That became a lot of a challenge, right? And this is something that organizations are still kind of grappling with. In fact, to a large extent, a lot of organizations are thinking of going back at least 30-40% physical back again, is largely because of this issue. What's your sense of it? I mean, given that you're dealing with many of these players, you are essentially, helping them move on a digital journey. What's your sense of it? I mean, where is the problem here, right? And how can one improve this uh, particular side of this entire thing, right? And that's a critical side. What's your sense of it?
Well, I want to just share a 1-minute story here, because India is a very peculiar country. I have been involved with similar projects in South Korea, in Vietnam, in Oman, Australia, Singapore,
Right.
Malaysia. But India has a very peculiar thing. And since we talked about workforce, we talked about people, what connects me. I'll just take a 1-minute story here. Many years back, today we talk about dynamic workforce, dynamic workplaces. But for, I think 12 years back, we were designing a large campus fitting around 10,000 people. And one of the things we decided, and we actually recommended, is that you don't need to have so many seats. If you have 10,000 people, you don't have 10,000 seats.
Right.
You can have 80%, because at any point of time, 22 to 24% people are always not available. Some on
Right.
leave, some on traveling. So I should invest in real estate, and real estate is a very costly proposition. So they said, very good. So every morning when somebody comes, he will just have a simple app, and the moment he badges in at the main gate, one seat will be reserved for him. And when he
Right.
goes in the evening, that seat will be free, another person can use it. Everybody was happy. But when we wanted to really do it, there was a peculiar problem. And this only happens in India.
Right.
A lot of people who send us feedback saying that I have my seat decked up. I have got my family photos, my God photos. Every morning I come, I do a small prayer. Now, if you're asking me to change my seat every day, what am I going to do with these photographs? Do I
Right.
take it home every evening, bring them? How can you handle this kind of, and this was something which we never thought,
Right.
even the management was taken in a way. So we thought a lot, and we said, okay, let technology play a role. So when you come in the morning, you click on your laptop through the cloud, the first thing comes is your family photograph, your
Right.
God photograph, have a print start. You don't need to have physical photograph.
Right.
So what I'm trying to
Right.
say is, there are problems, peculiar problems with workforce, but there are ways we can handle this. Last 10 years, I have personally seen a big shift in people, and last 1 year, it's been forced.
Right.
Remember when demonetization happened in this country, people were not willing to accept credit cards before that, especially SME guys, small shopkeepers.
Right.
The moment demonetization happened, every vegetable, and even today, thanks to COVID again, every vegetable cart puller, what we call ready wala, they'll have a Paytm or a Google Pay today.
Right.
It happened forcefully.
Mhm.
It happened, but in some cases, something can happen forcefully. Some cases, people have also come to realize after pandemic that there are things we need to change in our behavior. The
Right.
second part of this is the workforce required to bring this change. I'm talking about expertise.
Right.
There's a big problem there. As I said, 75% people struggle. And one of the struggle areas CIOs mentioned in the survey is, I don't have the right skill set to do it.
Correct.
I think people should also understand that outsourcing has been playing a big role here. And there are companies who can take this load, and there are companies who can give you subscription packages like cloud subscription for a particular tool. You don't need to buy and implement it in your organization. And this has been realized last 1 year. This has been forcefully realized, but we have been telling people for last 10 years. So both ways, the workforce who accept this, workforce who does it, I think there's a big change there. There are some problems with skill set, but I think that's being addressed with newer ways of attack, e-learning platforms, and all those kind of things.
Interesting. Rahul, I'm going to come to you, right? Now, I think what Mr. Singh is kind of alluding to is a very, very institutionalized environment, right? And that's a large corporate environment where people are, I mean, motivation is very different, right? Now, as soon as you start talking about SMEs, MSMEs, right? I think it's just a very different environment. I mean, thanks to Geo, for example, right? That it happened, right? And then there's cheap data, and people have been consuming, for example, a lot of content. They've been doing a lot of interactions on WhatsApp. They've been doing a lot of digital calls and so on and so forth, right? And that's not just true for say you and me, right? People, who are a little more fortunate, right? But that's something which is true for I think across the country, right? And people, what's the scene on this front? But when it comes to slightly more seasoned technologies, for example, right? You don't necessarily. I mean, the set which is employed in SMEs, MSMEs, right, is not necessarily as savvy, right? Their interaction with technology is just about 2 years, 3 years old, right? They're just about few apps that they're comfortable with, right? They're not very comfortable with larger environments, right? There's still an element of distrust, right? I mean, what UPI did, what Paytm did was exceptional, right? It was just like a two-step process, three-step process, but it took the kind of time that it did, right? What do you think this was a severe handicap across SMEs, MSMEs while we talk of continuity risk, right? Or when we talk of delivery side risks, right? I mean, this becomes very important, right? How do you how big was this gap? That's number one. Number two, what are some of the things that you think? I mean, given that you're into that mentoring process and coaching process, right? What do you think some of those things become? What are some of the things that can be done, right, to ensure that the workforce side adoption of technology becomes much faster, right? Because when you're talking about that transformation, right, you have to have every single piece of it involved, right? And employees and workforces are a very critical piece, right? Eventually, they're the ones who are going to use it and deliver, right? What's your sense of it? What do you make out of this?
So to answer your first question, I think a lot of companies didn't have a choice.
Right.
It was not about whether they wanted to adopt that technology. They didn't have a choice. They just had to do it. I mean, the whole landscape changed so dramatically that they
Right.
didn't have a choice. They had to do it.
Sure.
Moving forward, a lot of companies, a lot of individuals are really looking forward to getting back to ways of the old. However, one way that most companies, the sense that I get after interacting with a lot of SMEs is everybody is looking at a sort of a hybrid model.
Mhm.
They're not looking at 100% getting back to the ways of the old. They're not looking at 100% doing things the way we've been doing for the past 1.5 years.
Mhm.
We all realize that there have been certain technologies, there have been certain behavioral changes that we'll be happy to make them and make them a part of our life and working culture moving forward. And there are some ways in which we are looking at really looking forward to getting back to normal. I mean, if you look at say work from home and things, I don't think most companies are looking at either way is a 100% model. There are a lot of things that one can do from home. There are a lot of things that one can't do from home. I mean,
Right.
especially when you're talking about onboarding of new hires, or you're talking about, say, fostering the company culture into the thing. There's limitations to how much you can do working from home.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of companies, whether you're talking about small companies or large corporations, are perhaps looking at a hybrid model, where very, very efficiently with reduced cost.
Rahul, what I particularly understand is, how does the onboarding of the workforce happens for SMEs, MSMEs, right? I mean, given that you're active in the sector, right, it becomes important, right? I mean, I think each one of us understands in the large enterprise environment, right? Because, you're essentially dealing with an educated audience, right? Who
Yeah.
are essentially part of your workforce, right? It's easier there. I mean, these are people who've been interacting with technology, right? With mobile phones, they've been using CRMs, they've been using emails, they've been using multiple SaaS platforms, right? For a reasonable amount of time, right? What happens in an environment where you don't necessarily have an educated audience, right? Or a strong education base, right? Which takes care of the innovation that is there around technology and adoption, right? This becomes very, very pertinent across SMEs, MSMEs, micro entrepreneurs, and micro startups, right? What's your sense of that? I mean, how can that be changed? Is what I want to understand.
I think that's a very big challenge for smaller companies, especially where your whole onboarding process and the company culture is not so defined. You're essentially looking at personal interaction. You're looking at people coming into the company, coming into the office, and the work culture sort of imbibing in that. There are ways and means in which it can be done, but essentially, even in the past 1 year, we've seen, when you're talking about new employees, etc., at smaller companies, you have the person coming in for 15 days, learning everything, and then sort of remote working after that. So this is going to be a challenge moving forward, and especially for smaller companies and for micro entrepreneurs, onboarding, recruitment of new employees, training them, getting them part of the culture. We'll really have to put some thought into it that how this can be effectively done in a remote environment.
Interesting.
Because these are things that they're looking at really doing in a purely
And
physical environment.
I think India is a large market, right? And I think we kind of have to deal with our own complexities, right? I think our north,
Absolutely.
south, east, west behave completely differently, right? Nishant, I'm going to come to you, right? And my apologies for taking the time to come to you. But Nishant, what do you think is going to be the structure going forward, right? Right, in your organization, what are some of those things that you believe are going to be pertinent, right? Are going to be there forever, right? It structurally changes you as an organization, right? What's your sense of it, right? I mean, I'd love to understand your take on, adopting IT innovation, which is now being offered, right, by Tata Tele, by a bunch of, other stacks that are now kind of coming up, right? What's your sense of it, right? Going forward, what do you see? How do you see that getting blended into your entire growth plan?
Yes, so I would say if you look at the kind of shift that is coming in, right? So if you talk about the workplaces like co-working spaces, so even as our organization, we moved out from a dedicated office space to a co-working space wherein you can, so you don't want to in these days, right? And after COVID times, you don't want to take the headache of your Wi-Fi system. You need all of that managed services. Okay, all you
Right.
need to get is you get in the employees, right? So other part is, though we talk a lot about working from home, right? So there are a lot of good things, but then if you talk about the core problem in a
Sure.
small companies, like let's say a company with less than 100 employees, right? So once you have those employees in the company, there's a lot of things wherein you can, at least retention is something that is a major problem these days. So while people are working from home, yeah, so they have the time to go for 5 to 10 interviews and then crack one and then just move on, right? So
Right.
probably, yeah, so at least I would say in terms of technology adoption, though, primarily from our company, right? So we are all on cloud using AWS plus other infrastructure providers as well, right? So, and I would say we have a major shift moving everything to
Interesting.
SaaS model, right? So you
Interesting.
have managed services completely SaaS, no headache for like you need not to even have an IT administrator, right?
Right.
But you need to have that. So you may ask Tata Teleservice to at least provide you all of that VPN thing and everything, right? So instead of investing there, right, and then you need to have another guy managing that guy, right?
No, I
So
think I have a recommendation to make, right? I mean, I have a recommendation. I think Tajid, Gaurav, I think you definitely need to introduce a tool where you can track, how many interviews is your employee giving. I think that's an important part. Nishant, I'm picking it up from you. Please go ahead.
yeah, so that's the kind of shift that has been, and I think that would remain for a longer time. And then companies
Right.
are, so even if you see the investment coming in, right, in this sector, so people are investing a lot in getting these workspace wherein it's just plug and play, right, plug and go.
Interesting. I think that is, I think, Gaurav across his presentation kind of alluded to it, right? That, you don't have to necessarily build a lot of infrastructure. I think you can pay as you go, right? And I think that's the kind of what you're also referring to, saying that, the newer world organization is going to be far more efficient. It's going to be, pay as you go one. And I think you can scale your stack, as you require, right? Be it on your data side of things and, other services that you require. And I kind of agree with you. And I think Nishant, that's going to be a new normal. That's going to be a normal across, I think, all organizations, right?
Correct.
I think MSMEs will possibly take a little more time. I think we're going to need that, slight mind shift, but I think that's going to become a compulsion, right? Like I said, irrespective of whether the entrepreneurs, founders, promoters want to move in that direction or not, right? I think the market is moving in that direction.
Correct.
It'll become important for them to sort of move in that direction. Gaurav, this is all of this discussion is actually, kind of channelized into a very interesting, point, right? And I would love to bring you in on this point, right? And that is that, we've been talking about continuity and discontinuity and, the kind of risks that are involved, right? But I think one thing which is very important is that adoption of technology can give you access into newer markets, right? Newer geographies, right? And that's something which I think not a lot of people are, talking of, discussing, right? It's not something. I think the I think everybody that you think of, right? Every conversation that's going on is essentially around, how do you defend or save your existing base, right? How do you save that, right? But technologies always have that potential of, giving you access of much larger markets, helping you understand, nuances that you never necessarily understood in offline setting or a traditional engagement setting. It's a very interesting, stack and set to talk of, right? What's your sense of it? I mean, a lot of what you're doing, right? Of course, on one side where you're helping businesses retain their ground and regain their ground, right? What you're also doing is you're helping businesses understand that newer introduction or newer technologies can actually help them increase their relevance and sustenance, right, and overall profitability of the business, right? What's your sense of that? I'd love to hear from you.
So, I mean, good question, Ashu. Ashu, there are a couple of things there. You talked about technology actually, enabling new markets for SME.
Sure.
Very true, right? Number one, the language and the distance are not a barrier anymore, right? I'll give you an example of that. Day before yesterday, I was talking to one of my colleagues from the earlier organization. She started her own training center, right? It's an online training center where she's giving training for all those Java, Pythons, and all that, right? She came back to me and she said, Gaurav, I have a problem, and I know that you're working with this organization. Can you help me out? I said, what's the problem? She's like, I'm getting a lot of queries from Philippines, right? How do I handle that? How do I ensure that all those calls are going into my India number and then going into my call center? So imagine a startup who's just been originated 6 months back has started getting queries from a country like Philippines. So obviously there is no distance, there is no language or barrier, right? Number one. Number two, the customer service has become so personal at this point of time, right? Whether it's, I'll give you an example for that as well. So we've got a product, for which we use a tagline called Namaskar would no longer be greeted by a Vanakkam, right? So let's say if there is a Sharma ji calling from a Noida, we will ensure that the call center or the call will land up to a North speaking guy only, will not land up to, let's say, a different language guy. So the customer service has become so personal, and importantly, from a marketing point of view, a lot of technology, a lot of technological advancement has actually made my campaigns automation in a bigger way, and then obviously I'm able to scale them up the way I want to, right? So these 3-4 things have become really, really critical. Also, just to add, I've been a part of one of the fintech organization prior to this assignment during the COVID time.
Right.
I've seen a tremendous growth of close to 135% in the 6 months by just launching an app. The app was similar to a Paytm, but was into a B2B space where a B2B organization were able to transact using an app, right? So and they were never into those B plus segment markets, right? They were always, earlier before the Corona time, they were always like Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, Calcutta, Bangalore. But because of this pandemic, they were able to penetrate those tier 2, tier 3, and in fact, tier 4 towns as well. So clearly, technology has made a difference.
No, I think I kind of, when you're saying that the call center bit, right, Gaurav, I think there are newer, there are startups which are kind of disrupting, and I think we've seen the kind of deluge of capital, right? In the sense, the flow of capital and flow of capital, right? I think it's been bizarre, right?
Absolutely.
But I think there is a lot of shift which is happening in that setting as well, right? I mean, you have startups which are coming in, which are actually solving a lot of this through AI, right? Where you don't now necessarily need a call center, right? I mean, I can be talking to you. I could be, a Tamil speaking person from down south, right? And I can be speaking with you as fluently, right, with an interface, right, which is converting the language or making that in real time, right? And it's going to just be so much more easier, right? And I think that will possibly increase that growth possibility for many businesses, right? We're towards the end of the conversation, gentlemen. Sanjeev, I'm going to come to you. Right, I think Tata Tele has been working very, very hard, right? And I think in your capacity, you've been in charge, and you've been leading a lot of this change, right? To ensure that businesses survive, right? In the current times and the aberration that we've been in, and also in the future, right? I'd love to understand from you, what are some of those products and services that you think are going to make organizations future ready, are going to be extremely critical of the sustenance? I mean, there could be some technologies that could be vanity, and not necessarily all that critical, but then there are going to be certain services that are going to be, and products that are going to be extremely critical, like I said, right, because of the moving base, right, because of the environment kind of change, right? What are some of those technologies, what are some of those products that are being offered that you think are very, very critical, that every organization should look at and try and blend it with their offering and their organizational structure much faster than the usual?
So, Ashu, I think so. During this entire conversation, most of the product has been covered. So, Gaurav has already talked about it. I also talked about in my previous conversation as well. So, the submission and the thought over here is on the part of the scale which organizations are looking forward for henceforth. Right? So, to do any kind of a scale, the intent is how we can optimize our cost, and how we can ensure that there is the line of continuity stands in line without impacting my current business as well.
Right.
So to do so, we have all such product lines which can enable them to to transform their journey to the scale part. Whether it is in the form of network services, as I said, we are typical the organization, the 70-80% of the revenue still comes from the typical product line of network services.
Sure.
But having said that, the transformation which we have adopted has really given an edge now, whether it is in the form of Gaurav has talked about, you don't require the concept of BPO now. You require the concept work from home BPO. So that is something which is gonna do, which is we can see that and we can witness that. That how it has been happening. Nishant also talked about it, since they are also in the part of the IoT business as well, right? And the cloud telephony talked about. So we are very much in that. That's what happened because of the collaboration which we done. The second is the part of the virtual interaction. We are doing an interaction on Zoom, right? So we are we have done a partnership with Zoom as well at the for India. So we are providing these services in the unified communication space. So you will find us, futuristic. You'll find us, the space of cloud, or you talk about, the cloud services or Microsoft. Sure. You name the big brands, we are going to be associated. And the kind of journey as a group, if I'll talk about to you, you must have heard about, the Tata Business Hub, as an app, the super app, which is going to be launched. That is going to be the first, the B2B app, which is getting launched, which is in, the currently is in the testing mode, and, we are doing a beta testing with that. And that's where, the future lies with. That's where, all the product set lines, whether of, the services from the Tata Group can be offered on that, the super app. That's where the future lies. That's where the digital journey we are talking about. The customer not required to move into multiple directions to look it out for any services. There is a single, the app which is going to be there where you can look it out any of the, the product and services. And as an organization, we are, as I said, we are, moving toward diversifying ourselves. You'll find us, all the product lines with any organization looking forward to transform themselves, the digital perspective. We are very much there.
Interesting. Gentlemen, with that, I think this has been an absolutely phenomenal conversation, right? Sajid, I kind of completely agree with what you're saying, right? I think there's a requirement for one ecosystem to sort of be available, right? And I think that's something that we've kind of, I think we've understood the requirement of having a continuous play with one partner, right? Which is a diverse partner, right? I think with the credibility of the Tatas and the ethos of Tatas, right? And I think with the consultative approach that, you and your team across the country at, Tata Tele Business Services has kind of, worked with, evangelized, right? Continue to work on, I think is heartening to see, right? I think what you're trying to really do is be a partner in growth, right? Of many of these businesses. And I think that's something which is required for a country like India, because we operate across many layers, right? We're not, horizontal market. We're a fairly complex market, right? Level of exposures are very, very different, right? While, of course, we've now started to consume content, which is essentially, reducing that exposure gap, right? I think, but, we have challenges, right? We have regional aspects that kick in, right, in our decision-making process. And it becomes important that we have that hand-holding, which is available for business all throughout, right? Gentlemen, it was a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much. Gaurav, I would love you to step in, right? Your closing remarks for this entire conversation that we've had, exciting conversation that we've had, a thought-provoking conversation that we've had, and a very sharp conversation that we've had where we've covered many, many aspects, right? I'd love you to do the closing remarks. Over to you, Gaurav.
Sure. I mean, it's been great, and I really, I want to thank each panelist who have actually taken out time for this conclave, have shared their thought. Special thank to Mr. Ravinder, Mr. Rahul, Mr. Nishant, Ashu, to you, Mr. Tanjeet. It's been a great conversation. I could have done away with the presentation, but that's like a typical marketeer does. Ensure that the presentation goes forward. So yes, and at the end of the day, Tata Tele Business Services is here to help SMEs across the country, and we would love to hear some feedback, some kind of questions that are there. I'll be more than happy to answer going forward. And thank you, Ashu, for putting this up so nicely. I think you set the context pretty nicely.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great one. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.